as I said, we've been doing these events for the last 10 years, and it's all about networking and that stuff. So previously, we'd have done a bit of a networking exercise to get everybody speaking to everybody else, but it seemed to me that was going so well with everybody talking free that we don't need to do that. You guys are clearly already expert networkers, and my view is that the HR world and our HR careers, people like Julie and I, our careers have been created by the strength of our network and how we've driven that network. And so, you know, we're really devoted to sharing that experience and supporting all of you guys in getting the same benefit. So please come and talk to us and anyone else you see in the room, because the idea is to bring aspiring HR people early in their career or earlier in their career, together with inspiring HR people who have slightly longer in their career.
Been around the block a few times.
So welcome everybody and thanks for coming. And I'd like to introduce tonight Julie Elder, who is a founding partner of 3XO, which are an advisory organisation who advise at the top of house on HR stuff. And Julie's got quite a long career at the Stock Exchange, then Barclays, all this stuff. And what we're going to be focusing on tonight, and what I want to focus on and understand, is about reward and stuff like that. So Julie, welcome tonight.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for giving up the evening on this lovely sunny, balmy evening to be here today to listen to us.
Yes, yeah, fantastic. So Julie, your career has been, or a large part of your career has been working on reward and all that stuff. So what I know about reward people from my HR experience is that they disappear into a room and I don't see them for 6 to 9 months, and then they come out with but I'm told it's terribly important. So could you explain to us ingenues, why reward is important from an HR perspective?
Well, I think that no matter what your area of HR is, you will at some point have come into contact with someone in the reward team, whether it's when you're recruiting, whether it's to do with performance and development and the links to reward. So reward touches on a lot of what goes on in organisations, and reward is often also one of the things that matters the most to employees. And when I talk about reward, I don't just mean pounds and pence.
Right.
And it also matters a lot to the leaders of the businesses as well, because staff costs are one of the biggest costs within the business. So using those costs in the most effective way is super important.
Forgive me for a second. You've said something really interesting there. I used to work at the LSE as well, and yes, reward used to be about pound and pence.
Correct.
But now what does it include? What are the other things which we're including in that reward bundle, as it were?
Yeah. So the things that we get involved in are not just the pounds and pence, although I would say quite a lot of my work is to do with incentive plans, long-term incentive plans, some of the more complicated things that some clients might call us up for. But it's also increasingly to do with things like hybrid working, things like, you know, how am I motivating teams when money is scarce, creating environments that are positive, and of course linked to reward is also performance development. So there's also, you know, it used to be called objective setting, but you know, it's basically how are we motivating people to work on the activity that needs to be done? How are we assessing that kind of thing?
So I kind of think about reward, and I can see it's quite complicated because you're assessing thousands of people and working out all this stuff. But I imagine there's also it's necessary to connect it to the objectives of an organisation in some way. So how do you do that? How do you connect the outcomes a business is trying to do to a reward strategy and then to that in practical manner? If that's a fair question, it's probably quite a difficult question, but yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I would say is that most people who work in an organisation, they understand what that organisation is all about. Most people know what that organisation values. You can feel it when you're working there. What we try and do, well, the formal way we go about it is that we sit around with the top team or the HR folk. We'll talk about what we want the reward programme to achieve. You're going to be talking about things like it being competitive, retaining people, etc., etc. But what you really want to understand, and you get it through asking questions about or looking at what the organisation currently does, asking questions about what it wants to achieve. What you really want to understand is the root of that organisation. I'm not being very clear here, but it's in order for the reward to work, whatever it is, whether it's a benefit, whether it's a cash-based reward, it has to align with those values.
Yes.
Often those values are written down. Often those values mean not that
so
much.
So you're trying to reward according to the contribution which a person or a team is making to those overall organisational objectives.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. And it's getting those objectives right. So understanding what those are, that is actually we spend quite a lot of time doing and talking to the board about. Normally, what we'll do actually is hold sessions with different members of the board, ask them questions about what they like, what they don't like, why they don't like it, that kind of thing. That normally teases out what's wrong.
So this early setting, this early conversation about what is the reward strategy done with that small group of people.
Correct.
Then makes reward and the later bit either work or not. Is that kind of...
Yes. And then also, obviously, the HR director and other members of the HR team have a role to play, big role to play, because they normally know what's really going on.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I've found really useful is focus groups. When you're coming up with, once you've got an idea of the plan, for example, that you're going to put in place, what I found really useful is working with the HR director to have focus groups where you'll maybe talk through the idea, including the objectives or the strategy, and I've used survey tools, but you could have a more free-flowing conversation where you're asking people to give you some feedback about their concerns, about what they think, and usually from that you can also see there are themes that will come through.
Right, because you could do a big miss, right? So you could be offering people a monetary reward when that's not at all what that community is interested in, and then your feedback says, well, I got another whatever, but that's not what I wanted. Yeah,
and I think this is why reward is one of the areas where anyone who's interested in an HR role should familiarise themselves with, because at some point in your career you're going to get a business leader come to you and say, can you fix this by putting in an incentive plan, or that's rubbish, change this. And it's usually not just about the reward. Right, it's so that misalignment.
So somebody comes to you and says, look, if I put an incentive plan in this area, then it's going to make all the difference and change the world. You're kind of the pushback, saying actually that is not going to make a significant difference, or there are cleverer ways of achieving that.
Or it's not going to make a difference on its own.
Yeah.
It makes a difference if your supporting processes are there. And this is where I'm saying that reward touches a lot on other areas of HR. Really big one is leadership and development, or performance and development, because basically you want what you're rewarding to be the right things. Right. But quite often business leaders will think, well, actually the incentive plan will fix it, but it's not the incentive plan, it's the processes underneath the incentive plan, like performance management, for example.
Yes, exactly. So recognition So does reward now include kind of that associated recognition side? Because a lot of people I talk to are more interested in recognition than what might be limited financial.
And this is another thing, so people might say, well, I think we need a new bonus plan, whereas in fact what they actually need is managers who are getting involved more in the day-to-day with their teams, who are recognising individual contributions through things like, well, I know, let's all go out for a drink, or, well, just a well done.
Yes.
A reward plan, any kind of incentive plan, it's not going to fix that. In fact, it exacerbates it quite often.
Yes. So they're throwing money at me rather than recognition and stuff like that.
Yeah, and often if you haven't got your supporting processes in place, then you're throwing money at the wrong people.
Yes.
And everybody is looking around seeing that. Mm-hmm. So I think quite a lot of what we do in reward, obviously there's a technical element, and especially when we haven't talked about benefits, but things like pensions, etc., are very technical. Things like share option plans and other long-term incentive plans, all quite techy.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals are actually, is your organisation paying people or rewarding people for the right things? Is it all aligned with the company values? And is it really living those values through all the processes, ideally through all the interactions that every employee has with their manager? I mean, that's the dream world, but your objective is to get those things in place, and then the icing on the cake is, okay, then you get the reward at the end of the day.
Very interesting. So I can see there's more going on in that. Before moving on to the technicalities of the thing, can I ask you a different question, which is reward rewarding? Is it fun? Is it an exercise which is rewarding in itself? Because you've been involved with this for some time. So is it dry and as ditch water, or is it a fun group? Are we all on Excel spreadsheets all day? 15, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think familiarity with Excel is definitely an attribute that most reward people have.
Which not all of us HR people have, right?
But that's only part of it.
Yes.
Most of it is, we call it the engineering side of HR. It's building a tool that will support a business to achieve its goals, and it's also more than just building the tool. It's working out with the executive team or the HR director or whatever, is this tool really aligned, and is it really going to work, and what do you need to do within the implementation phase to make sure that it does what it should do? Because it's not just a plan or whatever, it's about as I said, I keep saying, about the supporting processes. So you ask, is it rewarding? And I would say it is absolutely rewarding. I wouldn't still be doing it. It is absolutely rewarding. The most rewarding thing is when you see it done well, when you can see that people understand that it's fair, that there's some consistency, there's some rigour around that it's doing what it should do, and then ultimately that you can see, and this is one of the great things about reward, that you can see, when it works well, you can see the ship turning, because people are being rewarded for the things that are aligned with what the company's goals are, and they are motivated.
Right, what you're describing very eloquently, might I say, is that the reward system is kind of like the engineering which engineers the construct, the people construct for the company's overall objectives. And when that's right, it feels great.
It feels really great. And it feels really great when you're aligned, when all of your HR specialisms are aligned. Yes. It's not just about reward. One of the things that I enjoy most is working alongside other reward professionals from different backgrounds. because we all bring different things to the table.
And presumably the engineering problem is really different from one industry to another industry. It's, you know, I imagine in a kind of industry where, you know, it's a service provider at a kind of, you know, UK scale, that's completely different from if it's, I don't know, a bank or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I found, and I've worked in organisations where I was in charge of reward for like 100,000 people,
Yeah.
and going to organisations where it might be 600 people, and in different places around the world, in different types of organisations, like some tech,
Yeah.
you know, it's all different scenarios. But I mean, I'm sure everyone here who's got their own specialism within HR knows that the fundamentals of what you're doing are essentially the same. It's about the application, and the skill is in taking your understanding and applying it successfully to those different environments. And one of the ways, as I say, that I really enjoy doing that is if you can work within a team, multidisciplinary team of people. You've got, I mean, the dream is to have a business goal, and you've got your whole HR team of which you're a part, and you're all helping steer the ship. That's...
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to move, I'm going to start on a different tack now, and actually, you know, you're obviously very successful and senior in that reward thing with lots of experience and stuff, but it wasn't always so. So how did you know, tell us about your career. Were you, you know, how did you start in HR? What are your key, the turning points in your career which has got you to where you are now?
I started in HR in the London Stock Exchange, actually, and I didn't apply for an HR role. I applied for a graduate role, and funnily enough, I went to university and studied history of art and English, which is quite unusual in the reward world. There's quite a lot of people who did maths and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I had done economics previously, and I thought I was on the track to work in the art world. But one day I saw an advert for the London Stock Exchange graduate programme, just sort of hanging around the university. I thought I'd apply for it, and as I was saying to you earlier, they had a fantastic graduate programme which worked closely with each graduate to place them within the organisation. And the areas that I was considering were like HR, communications and marketing. But I think in the HR world, for me, it was always something, I wanted to do something which was quite analytical, as well as there's a bit of psychology in there as well.
Right.
And so reward, actually I worked in HR policy and legal and a bit of reward, and then found my way into the reward space more fulsomely within Barclays, which was another turning point. And the great thing about Barclays was that you've got a business there which is a family of businesses. You know, you've got...
And you mentioned a liner. I mean, Barclays is a
huge.
real liner, right?
Yeah.
Tony.
So I think like a lot of people nowadays, you don't intend to stay somewhere for a long time, but I ended up working there for several years, but in different parts of the business. The group centre, Barclays Africa, the Caribbean, it all sounds very glamorous but wasn't, Europe, private bank, I mean there's just so many different parts of that business. Working in Barclays, well I actually left to go, I went and moved and lived overseas in Singapore and took a break, had children, and when I came back, Barclays came knocking again via an old colleague of mine, back to the networking and how important it can be in your life. I wasn't particularly looking for a role, but I started working there on an interim contractor basis, and within like 3 months I was the head of reward, ER and performance for the UK bank, which was 150,000 people, more or less.
Your HR career has taken you around the world, is what you're describing.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Which has been, again, it's fascinating, and another massive turning point for me, I think, would be one of my roles was as head of reward for Barclays Africa, and the reason that was such a turning point was that it was a part of the Barclays business which was slightly off the radar. So you're not that big beast, but nonetheless you have to. You're part of the Barclays brand. We had centres of excellence then, which I think comes and goes in HR, doesn't it?
Oh yes.
So there were things that we needed to do. But I had quite a lot of autonomy.
In a second, guys, I'm going to ask for questions. So prepare a few questions.
Yeah. So that was an incredibly rewarding time, because I was in exactly what I was saying before, actually. I was in a team, a nice tight team. We had some goals that we needed to achieve, and some fabulous people I think there were like 13 different countries in Africa. So lots of travel, lots of challenge. Yeah. It was incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, who'd have thought? I mean, HR careers, we often see ourselves not moving. It's static. It's kind of like. But it hasn't been like that for you at all.
Well, do you know what? I was thinking before we came here about things that I would say that. Sort of tips, what my pearls of wisdom.
Yes, please.
I think one of them would be continually reflecting on what your strengths and weaknesses are, which is part of being in a team. And if there are any opportunities that come up within your businesses for personal development, I would always take them, because I think the more you know yourself, and what your strengths and weaknesses are, the better able you are to work in a team, and then when you have your own team, you can augment with people that you know.
Looking into yourself.
Definitely, and I know it sounds a little bit schmaltzy, but I definitely think that. The second thing would be, and this is a way of knowing yourself or learning about yourself, would be to take opportunities when they come your way. If you get offered to go and work in the Caribbean, I mean, I'm sure everyone would say yes, please. But if you get offered to go and work wherever it may be, and whatever comes your way, I would always say to people, obviously think about it, but think. I would stress that people should probably go for it, because in those different situations, you learn about yourself and you learn about your craft, the application of your craft. And then the final thing that I would say, linked to the networks, is in all of those different places that I've been, I've got networks. So if you think about networks as sort of Venn diagrams that overlap, I've not just got 2 circles in my Venn diagram. There are multiple places where I've worked or lived. And I'm not just talking about work, actually. I'm talking about your personal lives as well.
Yeah.
All of those things overlap. And I'm sure the same for you, Tom. Like, you get to a stage in your life where you think,
yes, I mean, networking is, to me, is what's driven all of successful people's careers, and it is the intersecting networks. It's random. It's somebody who you're very fond of, but then introduces you to somebody else and all that stuff. Which is why I think these kind of events are so important. Yeah. But with that, I'd like to ask for questions from the audience. Anyone got any questions? Yes.
Thank you.
That's okay.
You spoke just there about your networks, and my question to you is, how do you maintain and nurture those networks? Because with your world, HR is taking you across the world, so how do you keep the Jamaican world nurtured and developed so that you are at the top? So if there is an opportunity, they think of you.
I suppose the short answer is probably the same that everybody would have, which is not as well as I should do. But how do I keep it? I think that the best networks are genuine networks. So those are people that you're genuinely interested in and are genuinely interested in you. And so really, and these days, I think technology is such that it's so easy to drop somebody an email or, you know, there's no excuse really. And I've found that, you know, even if you beat yourself up and think, well, I haven't contacted that person for a while, actually, if it's a genuine person in your life, who has been a genuine person in your life, it's easy to pick up. And I'm, you know, I've given the example of I'd left the UK and lived in Singapore, then I came back, and that was a period of about 4 years. And a colleague that I had kept, you know, just a little bit of contact with, Christmas cards back in the day when we did Christmas cards, that sort of thing. But they had my email address still, and that was how that happened. You know, what I'm finding now is that there are people that worked in a team for me sort of 10, 15 years ago who are now heading up HR departments themselves. So, and I've been able to pick up with them, and actually met up with some people recently that I hadn't seen for about, 10 years or so. And because we just had that little bit of contact, it was quite easy, and it was a genuine, you know, it's a genuine contact.
Well, I think it's kind of like a separate kind of tip. We all do this on our kind of social networks. We do it on our Instas and all that stuff. But you guys have all made the effort to attend tonight. Things like LinkedIn, and then you should be linking in, if you can, to 4 or 5 people who you've met tonight. And all of those people, because we've all put the effort to be here tonight, are going to be really delighted to have that cross link. And then, you know, that's, I don't know, 4 times, what have we got here? 60 people. So I can't do the maths. I'll ask the reward person, but that's an awful lot of new connections.
Yeah.
And we don't know whether they're going to be valuable later in our careers or whether they're not. But I suspect that's kind of like 10,000 more connections if we all just link in with 4 or 5 people from tonight.
Yeah, and you never know.
And all we've got to say is, hi, great to see you at myHRcareers.
Totally.
And that's it. And anyone here will link in with you.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is to just press send. I mean, obviously when it's a nice message, not the kind of annoyed message. Because sometimes we do stop ourselves, don't we? You kind of think, oh my God, they'll just think I'm such an idiot. Like saying, oh, hi, remember me, or whatever. You know, we met here. But I think most people, genuinely, most people are pleased for the contact. And some of those people, it can develop into more. You know, actually, there's no greater contact than the person that you can have a drink with and just sort of share.
Totally. I never met an HR person who wasn't happy to help an HR person.
Or have a drink.
Not yet, anyway. Maybe tonight.
Definitely.
Any other questions? Yes.
I mean, especially after the pandemic, like small, medium-sized company or large companies, actually HR department to focus on well-being, right, of the employees. However, as far as I know, most of the companies just offer very simple, basic mental health training, right? It's just for raising awareness, symptom signs, anxiety, depression, and very simple self-help tours. My question for you here is that as an HR expert, very experienced with worldwide experiences, right? I was wondering, would you consider much more multidisciplinary approach? For example, a combination of medicine, psychology, emotional intelligence, life science, health science, neuroscience, combination with dance movement, maybe art like learning. So by the end of the day, we need to empower people to develop the intensity focus infrastructure that minimize the harmful impact on the mental and physical health. Would that be an option?
Yes, I think definitely. And I think a plug for Varan maybe, because technology is one of the ways that can really help with that. You know, I think increasingly people want more out of work than just pounds and pence. I mean, obviously pounds and pence, that's important. But people are looking for something much broader these days. And this is where, again, you know, you said about multidisciplinary. I think multidisciplinary teams can really help come together and build that, because the folk who work in learning and development, who often are, you'd think are at opposing ends of the HR world. One is kind of, people think, oh, that's all soft, and the other reward folk, we're all the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Actually, we actually are very similar in what we're trying to achieve, which is to develop and motivate people to get, not just, because I'm not just about...
we all want our companies to be successful.
Correct.
And that means our people need to be successful, and that means they need to be happy. And the dimensions you're talking about are as important, I think, as the financial dimensions.
Absolutely. And I think particularly in what hopefully won't come to pass, but it's looking like it will come to pass, where you've got economic constraints that are going to be placed on companies. You've got that. You've had COVID, where people have come out of that with, I think everybody's probably thought in a slightly different way. They've certainly had their views challenged about how they work, what they want out of work. And then I also just think nowadays, many people, work is one element. They have a portfolio of things going on in their lives. I mean, I've spoken to people this evening who have got, I say to them, what do you do? And, they've got about 3 or 4 things that they do. So facilitating that as well is another challenge.
Totally. We've got another couple of questions.
Hi, Julie. Thanks.
Hi.
So I believe, in the room there are different sets of people. Somebody, some are working for organizations, some are actually doing their own business. You yourself have worked for others, and now I believe you're embarking upon your journey of being an entrepreneur and doing your business. So my question to you is, how has been this transformation to you? And I believe you're still at sort of an nascent stage of starting your entrepreneur journey. What are the challenges do you face as a business owner at the moment against, how you're working before for a bigger organization?
Yeah,
So
good question. How did it come about? Network. That's how it came about. And plus, your point about working lives, what people want out of work, changing. So 3 of us, Rupert, I don't know whether some of you might have met him before at one of these events. Rupert McNeil, who was the Chief People Officer at the government. A colleague of mine from, that was like 15 years ago. And another ex-colleague of mine. We all decided that, coming from various places, that we wanted to do something different.
Is that why you called yourselves 4XO?
and what we wanted to do was take our knowledge and experience and work on interesting projects which would hopefully be well rewarded. But actually the interesting projects bit of it's really important to us. So that's kind of where it came from. And how is it different working for ourselves? It's sometimes quite scary, which I'm sure anyone who has their own business will definitely recognise. Also incredibly exciting. And it's also empowering, I'll say that. Am I glad for the time that I had in big corporates? Absolutely. That gave me so much in with the benefits and the paycheck coming every month. But I'm incredibly positive about this phase in my life. So.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, we'll take one more question and then we'll split for the next part of networking.
So I work as an HR generalist.
Oh, okay.
And I think throughout my career, the amount of times I've heard from a manager, if we don't do something about someone's salary, they're going to leave. And I think at the moment, the Great Resignation is a hot topic. And I just wondered, from your perspective, how important do you think money is, people kind of staying in their roles, or do you think there's actually other factors that are more important?
Oh, I think that is a question that is each individual circumstance will be different. I would say that throughout my career, as like you, I've had people, the common thread is, oh, so-and-so's going to leave because they're not paid enough. Sometimes that might be true, but quite often it's because they've got a really bad manager, quite frankly. So it's not about the pay bit, it's about the rest. Do I think money's going to be an important factor in the next couple of years? I mean, you can't watch the news and say that no, it's not. I think that, I mean, I'm hearing that some companies will be paying kind of one-off bonuses to just try and keep people motivated, keep people having enough. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult problem, and I think for some companies, frankly, I think some companies will go out of business. You know, it's going to be difficult for all of us. I think back to your point earlier, Tom, about recognition. I mean, assuming things are at a level which is acceptable in terms of pay, I think it's all the more important for some of this other recognition to come into play.
I think that's very interesting. I mean, tonight we talked about reward. I think next time we're going to talk about management and management skills and how HR can contribute to those areas, which I think is fascinating as well, because I think your point is... Oh! Is that it? Can everyone else hear?
It's the fridge.
It's the fridge.
Because you kind of talking that way as well.
I see. Sorry. Can you hear me better now? Yeah, so next time we're going to talk more about management and how that contributes and what the HR role is in creating a really great management environment. But tonight I would like to thank Julie for her insights in an explanation of what reward is, why it's important, and why we should be interested in it. So Julie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was great to hear you speak.
I want to say one thing, which is just, there are some great resources out there on the CIPD website, I'm not flogging anything, on reward, that if you're ever kind of thinking, oh, please use those, because...
So the CIPD website.
Yeah, the CIPD website's got some really fantastic stuff on reward.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone else. Now, I would like now for us all to continue our networking.